everyone, thanks for joining us. I am Alex Poterek, a senior designer on XD. Glad you guys could tune in for designing Adobe XD. Yeah, I'm flying solo today. No Talon. Talon's off doing some other things right now, so I'm stepping in for him and hoping to fill his shoes. It's been a while, so I'm glad to be back in this chair hosting this weekly event. Today, if some of you might know that we're going to be doing a lot of auto animate stuff, so it's something really like near and dear to my heart. We've been working on that feature for a really long time. We finally kicked it off at Max, and the community's been killing it. Like, they've been coming up with some really cool things, and I just kind of want to show that off and kind of work through some of those kind of use cases and see like how people are using it, what they're doing with it, and how you can do it yourself. So feel free to ask any questions in the channel. I'll be reading along and seeing what you guys are up to. So welcome everyone, Miriam, Emmanuel, Eric. Yep, no Talon today. Sorry. I hope I'll do justice to Talon today. Yeah, so like I said, auto animate's been something that I've been working on for a long time. I tend to work on a lot of the prototyping features, and auto animate's been the one that we've been really kicking into high gear lately. So feel free to ask me any questions that's like prototype related. I mean, anything XD related really, but prototyping specifically, I can probably answer it a little bit more details. Let's get started then. We can jump over to my screen. I'm going to do a little recap into what XD is, just because I know a lot of people might be tuning into this, like wondering what XD is, like what do you use it for. So I apologize to you that are like really familiar and have been using this tool for a while. It'll be brief. So XD is a design tool that you can also prototype in, and you can kind of get that sense just based on these tabs up front right here, right? So you have your design, you have prototype, and then down here you have your share mode, so you can actually share what you create with people. It's a pretty basic tool, but really powerful and easy to get into if you're not familiar with what it is. So the basics of it are you create an artboard, you design it out just like you would in, like, say, Illustrator or Photoshop if that's what you're using today. And you go into prototype mode, and you can actually just start to link things up, whether it's an artboard, whether it's an individual object that you want to go to this artboard or that artboard, and then you can kind of create these pretty elaborate prototypes that you can share out. So in this case, this one I can drag across, and you can start to get the sense of a sort of like the cover flow, old school sort of Apple term, I guess. And then after you kind of come up with something that you like, you can go over here and hit share. And you can publish a prototype, which is just generates a link that you can send out to any of your stakeholders. And you can just get feedback on that, get comments. I can go ahead and do that real quick. So I'll create a quick link and then show you what that looks like on the other end. Let's go here and actually launch Safari real quick. Over here you have your comments, so I can leave a comment. Sometimes we like to give presentations on the web actually, and then as we're getting feedback from our stakeholders live, maybe they're not the ones giving us comments, but I can take notes. I can say something like, Talon suggested making the covers smaller. Then I'll just hit that. So it's actually a really good way just to kind of keep notes in real time, and then everyone can kind of see how you're tracking that, and then they can actually comment on it and be like, oh no, I didn't mean that, like let's maybe reword that a little bit differently. Then aside from that, there's some other cool things in the share mode, which is like publish design spec, which is great for your stakeholders, especially your engineers. So this will like create all the image data, the colors, the spacing that they can easily just go into and get all the information that they need. So let me just see if I'm missing anything on the chat. All right. Hey, Linda, thanks for joining. Zaria, Jason, welcome everyone that's just tuning in. Okay, so let's take a look at the design spec. I've been trying to use Safari lately, but it's challenging sometimes. So right away I can go into one of these artboards and actually see all the colors that were saved by the designer that are being used, all the different typefaces, the colors, the different font sizes, and like bold, medium, and everything like that. So yeah, that's the basic rundown of Adobe XD. So if you're not familiar with it, now you're a little bit more familiar. So like I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be really doing most of our designing today with Animate, and feel free to post some like great finds that you found with Animate that maybe you don't know how they did it and you want to see how it's done. I'm more than happy to start to recreate those for you. So if you just do a quick Animate Twitter search, you can start to get a pretty cool list of people that are tagging Adobe XD and Animate and seeing what they're up to. So for this one, for instance, is Tom. He's been doing he did a cool thing with masking. Let me see if I can't get this to play. And of course it won't play when I'm live. Okay. So he actually set up a drag, so you can create one of those like set the time labels or components that you see often on like a timer or the clock app on iOS. And I'll actually jump into XD and actually show how he's been doing that. So he's using masking along with the Animate and the drag functionalities. Let me see if I can get into my chat because I want to bring that up. Let me pull up the chat real quick so I can get access for you guys. Okay, this will be Inception-y. This will be weird. Cool, so let's take a look at some of the stuff you posted. I like where this is going already. Let's see how it plays through. Awesome. Oh, the Talon hair generator. This is awesome. Okay. I don't know if Talon's seen this, but he needs to. You need to have a hat setting. He needs a hat setting. That's the brand, the Talon hat. But no, this is great. This is awesome use. This is actually the use case we had in mind when we built this feature. Is this exact app? That's fantastic. Nice work. So that's a great note just to jump into some of the Animate features. Let's pop back over to Twitter and let's actually go ahead and start to create some of these that we're seeing in here. So this drag event that's happening right now. So it's actually really simple. It might actually seem complicated at first glance, but once you understand sort of the patterns that they're using, it's something you can really reuse and start to make your own or like really push the limits of these things. So in this case, I'm assuming it's just going to be like, pardon me, we're going to have a 0, 1. Let me zoom in here. 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4. And I'm using the 0 in front of it just to keep the width of all the digits the same once we get into double digits. 9, 10. Okay, so we'll actually blow this up a little bit. So now that you have your string of all the digits that they can actually select from, you'll go ahead and just draw a square over it. And this is going to be sort of that viewport. And you'll select both of these things and go to Object and then Mask with Shape. So all your numbers are still there. They're just being masked by the shape that you put over it. And you can get a little fancier if you want to kind of create that fade effect. So you'll put that square over there, go to Fill, and then let's do a linear gradient. So that'll look something like this, where I have this white. This is black. Oop, I'm missing my... Oh, I have to redraw that. Okay, let's try that one more time. Linear gradient. There we go. We'll set this up so this is white, and then have 0 opacity. So in the center, it's going to be 0 opacity. This will be white as well, but it'll be full opacity. And then you can kind of make your adjustments here, and then sort of reposition everything on the fly. So this will technically start to fade now. So what I'll do next is duplicate this artboard, and that's actually a really important thing to start to get in the habit of, is instead of recreating things, just to duplicate that, because what XD is doing with the auto animate feature is it's actually looking to see all the same layers by name in the layers panel, and they're saying, okay, if these things have the same name and they're the same object type, then we're just going to interpolate between all the differences. So if I move something on one artboard, it'll just actually make that move automatically for you. So what we're going to do is go to our layers panel so we can get a little bit better understanding of that. I'm going to hide this for now because it's sort of getting in my way. And then we will just do something like that real quick. And I'm actually going to bring that in a little bit. So this is our mask up front. And then from here, we're just going to say, when I drag on this, essentially, I want to go to this artboard, and drag's already selected in the menu for me right now. But if it's not selected for you, just go to this drop down and select drag. Auto animate will work, and then give it a test. So from here, oop, I messed up something. Let's see. Let's troubleshoot it live. Let's see. Let's actually turn off drag and tap just to make sure everything's all auto-animated up. Yep, okay. So that's working. Let's try this. Drag can be a funky one sometimes. Just getting the, yep, there we go. Okay. So now I'm getting that same effect that we saw in the Twitter example, where essentially my drag is actually going to be attached to the playhead of the animation between Artboard 1 and Artboard 2. Right now we have a little funky orientation thing happening. Let's see if we can't fix that with using a little trickery where we will put a little invisible circle, or not circle, but rectangle, and copy this over here, and then set the drag down here. There we go. Okay. So with that rectangle selected, we'll go into prototype mode. Select this, have drag selected, and then hopefully it'll play through the right way. So I'm essentially grabbing that invisible circle and then pulling it down. There are many ways to kind of accomplish the same thing. So sometimes you have to get a little creative, because when you start to layer things, the interaction models get a little weird. We might actually be able to just ignore that and go into this masked group. That actually wouldn't work, but like I said, you have to be a little bit playful when you're trying to come up with some more advanced things, but using masks is a really powerful way to start to create some of the visuals and some of the interactions that you're trying to accomplish that things like iOS support or Google Materials. So that's a pretty basic way of doing that, and I think the next example is using masks in a different way too. So you can see this little node, or this card, has this animating border. So what they're doing is they're using essentially the mask is the stroke, and then they're filling it in behind the scenes. So let's go ahead and try to recreate something like that. So I'm just going to delete all these things. I don't need any of that on this artboard. This one actually is going to be a little trickier. This should be an interesting thing to try to do. So I'm going to fill this in completely. Let's make a dark fill right there. Let's take another rectangle and actually build that stroke that we're gonna actually use for the mask. And it had a nice little rounded corners to it. And then let's, just for being able to see it a little bit better, let's ramp that up a little bit. And I actually want to see what this looks like. So I'm going to put a background color just so we can kind of see when things are working and when things aren't working. Okay, so we'll select these two things and let's try the Boolean. Actually, I'll probably have to expand this stroke. So we'll convert this to path. So what that did is created a path out of this, this completely. Actually, what we'll have to do is duplicate this. So this one's actually a lot trickier, and like I said, you have to get a little bit creative with these sometimes. So we're gonna do something like that, I think. And then create a group out of this, and then maybe knock it out. Oop. We're gonna expand this. Bear with me a little bit. Okay. We're gonna knock that out. Okay. And then we're gonna use this to do a object mask. Now we're going. Okay. So again, sometimes you have to get the fundamentals down, and then things will fill in. So you can actually start seeing how it's gonna play out like that, right? So we'll actually create a rectangle. Go over here. And then duplicate this. And then we'll fill in over here. So this is a pretty basic way of showing it, illustrating it. And then we'll do a tap and auto animate, and it should play out. So then you'll get that completely encompassing thing. So masks are super powerful. They can get a little involved, but starting to master how masks work, you can get to pretty advanced things. So if we spent a little bit more time with the rounded corners, you could probably recreate this one pretty easily, just knowing how that first functionality starts to work. So that's a pretty basic way of doing that one. Also, a little call out over here is we have an article posted recently about best practices, so you can actually read through a lot of these things. It goes and talks about things like making sure you're duplicating your artboards, making sure your layer names are the same, how some other trickery works with artboards, because when you're flying things in off of other artboards, it starts to go onto the pasteboard, so you have to be able to work around those things. And a good example of that is this animation, where if I have these three cards, the second I let go, you notice this is on the pasteboard. It's no longer associated with this artboard. So the trick around that is to start to create groups. So if I group all of these things together, it'll stay associated with that. So then I can go ahead and duplicate this artboard. Then we'll give it a little bit of space because we're going to start moving things and we don't want them to overlap. So Artboard Management is also huge too. We will then move this over here, get it sort of in the center. We'll move this one down and then make sure that's actually in the center. Then give a little bit of space on each side because we're going to make this middle one grow a little bit. And yeah, get something like that going. Awesome. So now I can select this group and go over here and assign drag to it. And then you can see that it has, of course, it didn't go that time. And did I have tap on it? This is the presenter's luck right now. Okay, it works with tap. It might be a directional thing right now that I'm working through. I don't know. I might have broke it in this bug, or a bug in this build. Let me troubleshoot this real quick. So if I do that again, move this down, center this up. Make this bigger. Get rid of that. And then try that one more time. Or if I assign drag to this object, auto animate, it should work. There we go. I must have run into a bug in this build. So it should work all the time for you guys. For me, I'm using a build that's maybe not as stable right now. So one of the cool things you can start to do when you start to chain these things together is you can work with tap, you can work with drag, you can work with time. And when you do that, you can string together animations that look like this, where I can click on it, you'll have this really fun auto animate feel to it. If I go back one, hit play again. So you can start to drag between different things. You can tap on it to get this really nice sense of feel. You can click on this and you can see all of these things start to cascade in a different time. And that's another group tricking, right? So if you look at this artboard, there's a whole lot of things down here. Let me get rid of this mess down here. So all our objects are actually invisible down here, all spaced apart in a giant group. And what this does is it lets everything kind of come in different velocities, and then they can snap into place at different times, or at least give the illusion of different times because they're coming from different distances. So that's what you'll see when you kind of hit click right there. And you sort of see that bouncing. That's another thing that you can do with auto animate, or at least with the new version of XD, is look at all your features and then look at all your easing options. This is another tip that's in that article, and easing can really change the way like the whole entire prototype feels. So when you look at something like snap, it has a little bit of a bounce to it. Wind up will really give it this really funky, playful feel. So a lot of times when you're working with data or a little bit more or less fun information or information graphics, you can really give it a playful wind up or a bounce effect to it. Then you have your classic ease in, ease out, and those are really important just to play with them. Sometimes you'll just like have these like happy surprises where you didn't know what to expect, and then you play through it and then you're like, okay, this is actually starting to feel a lot better. This is the missing piece of what this animation was. And then like I was mentioning before, once you have your, I'll play through this again. Once you have your drag effect down, and then you have your tap effect down, then another tap when you're starting to use all the distances. There's also the timing. So we have the time feature that we released a couple months ago, which lets you trigger an animation automatically or another artboard automatically. So you click this, and then you can start to see that I have this looping graphic right here. That's all done in XD. That's not we're not bringing in any sort of GIF or video. And how that's working is we have these two artboards that sort of have this loop happening, right? So it's just saying keep doing this over and over and over again until I click right here. And then clicking right here, as you'll see, we'll just launch to the next thing. So it'll get it out of that loop, and then you can play through it again. Let's see, people are posting a couple things. Oh, cool. There's a post to the article. Yeah, go through that. If you have questions about anything that I mentioned in there, let me know, and I can speak to that a little bit in the time that we have left. Something I mentioned before, and this is more of a troubleshooting tip, is if you end up having a group called like 527, and then over here it's 528, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes you created like the same thing on another artboard and pasted it from the wrong artboard. That'll actually break your animation completely. So as you can see, like nothing's happening when I do that. So even though I have this drag set up, it will just fade out. So because they're not associated with each other and XD can't find that layer on that other artboard, it thinks they're completely different. So it's just going to do a cross dissolve. So it's just going to fade out what's not there anymore, and it's going to fade in what's new. And that's a pretty important thing to understand about Auto Animate as well. Where if you have, let me see, if you have this square right here, you copy and paste that over there, and then make a move, it will auto animate between those two deltas, like I mentioned. On tap. And if you go ahead and change that name, because there's also times when you don't want it to actually animate, and we're automatically doing this for you. So the key to that is actually just changing the name, and then doing a click, and then it'll just fade. And it's that easy to do those kind of things. It's a workaround, and in the future, hopefully, we'll have a way for you to see what's linked, what's not linked, and then update things a little bit more outside the layers panel. I'm not the biggest fan of like using layers all the time, and I know a lot of people don't tend to go in there until they need to, until something's like in their way and they have no way around it. So we'll offer different ways to manage those things in the future. Let's see, other fun things you can do in Auto Animate. Let's see if there's anything that pops out. We don't have too much time left, but this is a fun animation. Some basic, they're using that same masking technique. There's unlimited ways you can use that masking technique. Something as simple as this, or sometimes something more advanced like that card where we masked out that stroke a little bit. This one, I'm not sure what that one is. This one's cool. So this is like a full-on app happening right now, from screen to screen. And then preview on your phone, actually being able to tap and then add that that feel to it on your phone in your hand is pretty big. That's an important part of this whole thing too. And oh, this one's really cool. Let's see if I can't post this one up. Yeah, I would really suggest anybody just going on Twitter, searching Auto Animate, and like getting inspired by a lot of it, just seeing what you can do and what you can accomplish, and you'd be surprised what you can get away with just these visual keyframes. It's just a basic storyboard that you're setting up, and then you're wiring it together with interactions, and then you have a pretty elaborate prototype that really feels real, comes to life, and is more than just that simple transition from one screen to another. And yeah, feel free next week to post some of the things that you created, and I'd love to see what people are doing with it. And yeah, post it to Twitter, hit hashtag. Look for me on there at Poterek. It's posted in there, I think, to the article, and that will wrap it up for us this week. Thanks for tuning in, and see you all next week.